I'm delighted to be here. It's always great to come back on campus and to fellowship with my fellow Trojan family. So thank you so much, Janet and the Center for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I am delighted to talk with you about Room to Read today. Kind of a funny name for an organization, but the idea is that we want to create room or space for young people to develop a habit of reading. And we do that in a number of ways. So we'll talk a little bit about how we do that. We'll talk about our business model. And we'll talk about my journey and a few other things that will really inform you on how nonprofit businesses and enterprises are not that dissimilar from for-profit organizations. I spent 27 years working in the for-profit world in a corporate setting. I spent another 10 years in consulting. I still do consulting. And now I've been in nonprofit for a couple of years. And it runs the same way. You have different revenue sort of channels. You have different objectives. In some cases, you have different ways of organizing your business to make sure that you're servicing the needs of your customers. But the thinking, the underlying thinking, the backroom work, everything that goes on is very similar to a for-profit company. So we'll talk about those things. We're gonna ask you to hold most of your questions until the end. We'll have about 15 minutes to respond to questions. But after each segment, I'll entertain a couple just to make sure that we can kind of stay on schedule today. Okay? So my journey. I would apologize for this ratty picture, but it holds too much importance to me to do that. This is my mom, my dad, and myself. Growing up, I was in Compton at the time. I grew up in Compton. Moved from Watts to Compton in '59. We were moving up in the world, right? From Watts to Compton. But that's my mom and dad. My dad and mom are the reason why I'm here today in terms of the work that I do. And so it was important for me to include their picture and to help you understand my motivations in working in the nonprofit sector. As I said, I started in the for-profit sector, but I've always, as long as I can remember, volunteered in a number of different ways, but principally around children, either in education or in healthcare. And so as I worked mostly for ARCO, I spent 19 years with ARCO. As I worked for ARCO and other companies, I spent all of my other time working in the nonprofit sector on a volunteer basis. And it's because of them. Today, I have the opportunity to work around the world. Here, I'm reading, not reading to, but reading with a group of our GEP scholars. GEP stands for Girls Education Program. One of the programs that we have at Room to Read is to educate girls, to keep them in school, to provide life skills training, and we'll talk a lot more about that in a minute. But to have the opportunity to move from Compton and to travel the world and to contribute in a way that I think really changes the world is a real blessing, and I think it's because of the work that my parents and the values that my parents instilled in me. So my motivation and our motivation at Room to Read is in fact to change the world. That's what we're all about. We're doing it one child at a time. So far we've impacted over 6 million children. And we do it in a number of different ways. But our motivation really is a recognition that education is transformational. And the reason I showed the slide with my parents is because growing up in South Central, they were able to get through to me that education was in fact transformational, that it could literally change my life and open up doors and provide opportunities that I had never even dreamed of. My brother didn't get that same message. He spent most of his years in prison. He's in prison today. So it's, we have choices that we can make as children and as young adults growing up, and those choices have consequences. And fortunately, they were able to get through to me. So that's our motivation, to change the world. 793 million. What do you think that number represents?
Literacy.
Yeah, literacy. 793 literate people in the world today. And in addition to that, 2/3 of the world's illiterate population are girls and women. mostly in Southeast Asia, Southern Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa. So that's where we work. We're based in San Francisco. Our headquarters is in San Francisco, but our work is international. We don't do any work domestic. 171 million. 171 million children can be lifted out of poverty if they're provided with an education. In addition to that, we know that educated women, educated girls, raise educated children. They contribute more to their communities. They make better decisions as it relates to their own lives. So, in addition to that, there's a huge benefit to education. Completing primary school can increase, just primary school, can increase salaries 13 to 20%. Mandela said education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. At Room to Read, we say world change starts with educated children. That's our mission. That's what we're all about. When you talk about businesses and you talk about business models, one of the things you have to think about is, what business are you in? What are you doing on a day-to-day basis? What's your fundamental purpose, your reason for coming to work every day? For us, it's this. How Room to Read got started, I won't spend a lot of time talking about this, but I think you're probably curious, and it's an interesting story. The gentleman on the left, on your left, is John Wood. And John was an executive with Microsoft and was grinding it out, as most of us do in the corporate world, 24/7, and decided he needed a long break. So he was going to trek in Nepal. And he went on a trek with his dad, and actually, during that trek, met a schoolmaster. He visited a school and talked with the schoolmaster in the school. And the schoolmaster said, we really appreciate your visit. We're glad that you were able to come and talk with our students. He said, but next time, bring some books. Next time, bring some books. John went home, talked with Microsoft, talked with some other colleagues, and organized this huge book drive. And literally delivered books back to that school on the back of a yak. And after that time, he wrote a book called Zach the Yak, which is a children's book. It's one of the books in our library, to tell part of that story. So that was John's thing. John started, he decided to leave Microsoft. He thought this was a much more interesting calling. And he started Room to Read, along with Aaron and Dinesh. This is Aaron Ganju, and Dinesh Sridhar. Dinesh was in Nepal, working in the development field, and was very interested in what John wanted to do, and offered to help John get these books distributed, not just to that one school in Nepal, but to other schools in Nepal. And ended up becoming the country director for our first office in Nepal, in Kathmandu. Aaron is the current CEO of Room to Read, but Aaron was working as an investment banker in Vietnam. And she was so compelled by John's work and his story, and he's told his story in a book called Leaving Microsoft to Change the World. She was so compelled by that story that she left investment banking to open the office in Vietnam. So that was our second country. So these are our three founders. Most of them from the for-profit sector. Most of them leading jobs that were very lucrative, and jobs that, in many ways, material ways, were very rewarding. But like me, have gotten so much more out of the work that they've been doing with Room to Read. This job is in fact, I can easily say, the most rewarding job I've ever had. Today, that actually occurred back in 2000. Today we're in 10 countries, soon to be 11. We're adding Indonesia next year, operationally. We, as I said, work primarily in Southeast Asia, Southern Asia, and Southern Africa. but we're also considering other opportunities in places like Brazil, which a number of donors would like us to get into. But that's the work. That's where we're working currently. Any questions about that before I go on to our programs? Okay, our programs are really two pillars. There's a literacy program and there's a girls' education program. The literacy program is really designed to operate in these four areas. Reading and writing instruction, that's actually training teachers to train students, their students, to read and write. We don't employ teachers that work as teachers. We work through government schools, through public schools in these countries. We don't work in any private schools. And we train those teachers to be more effective at what they do. We also provide materials. We have a book publishing business. We provide materials to help them do that in a better way. We also provide libraries to give students access to books, not just when they're in the classroom, but when they're outside of the classroom. And we also build classrooms. We build schools, and we renovate schools. Because in the developing world, there aren't enough classrooms. It's common to see classrooms with 60, 70, in Africa, 100 students. So they need more space. They need more room to read and to learn. This is not that uncommon classroom, in this case, in Sri Lanka. Tough place to learn, tough place to focus. Not just visually, but think about the heat that these students have to put up with in the summers. And in the fall, the cold they have to put up with in the winters. This is what a renovated classroom looks like. After Room to Read has either redesigned it, remodeled it, or if we build a new school. Reading and writing instruction, I've already mentioned. Teaching children, teachers of children to teach their children to read and write. Book publishing. We're the largest book publisher in Nepal. What we found is it's one thing to provide the space, to build the classrooms, to renovate the classrooms. It's another thing to train the teachers. But if they don't have the materials to teach children how to read and how to develop a habit of reading, then their work is certainly going to be less effective. So organically, we started identifying needs and being an innovative company and being a very nimble, small, nimble organization, we decided that we need to publish books since they don't exist. And we hired authors, and we hired writers, illustrators, and we taught workshops on how to write children's books. And we do that in every country that we're in. And so now there's a community of authors and illustrators that are on their own are writing children's books and adding to the inventory in those countries. These are just some examples of some of the books that we've published. So you can see very high quality, right? Stories that are in the context of those countries. Illustrations that are in the context of those countries. The idea is to provide something that will encourage children to read, that will want them to want to explore, to want to engage, to get involved with that text. And in those countries, typically they don't get books until 3rd grade, and that's a textbook. It's not a storybook. So part of that strategy to develop a habit of reading was to provide those materials. Last year, just last September, from UNESCO, we received an international award for book publishing, something that we're very proud of. And you can see from some of the titles that I've illustrated why. So, great. We've got books in the hands of children in the classroom. But what do we do to provide greater access to those books? What about when they're at home? What about on the weekends, right? What about during recess? They're not in the classroom. How do you get books in their hands then? Well, school libraries was another need that we identified. Many schools don't have libraries at the primary level. And those schools that do, they often look like this. So we have a program to renovate libraries and to also build new libraries where they don't exist. This is a room-to-read library. Promoting a habit of reading, providing space for children to read, right? Providing room for them to read. Those books are leveled based on reading proficiency, and they're color-coded. So children know if it's a blue book, it's something that they can read. If it's a red book, it's something that they can read, no matter what level they are in school. We train librarians. Typically, they're teachers because they don't have libraries, they don't have librarians. So we train teachers to be librarians to manage these libraries in the schools. And those librarians, and in some countries where we really made a lot of headway with the governments, we've convinced them to actually employ full-time librarians. But that gives these children access to books not just during school hours, but they can check them out, take them home, right? In some of our countries, our children live on sandbars in the middle of a river, and so books can be delivered by boat. In some of our countries, they're delivered by the backs of elephants. We have a mobile library. So lots of ways to get these books to children, and we're very innovative in the way we do that. Any questions about our literacy program? Yes?
I noticed some of the books have English on them. Are you teaching English as well in the classroom?
Well, we publish some of our books that in a bilingual format. That's how I was able to read with some of the children. So we do teach it in bilingual format. Again, we don't teach in the classroom. We train teachers. But yes, some teachers do teach children both the native language and English. But our whole thing is not to impose our values, our cultures, our context, our language on these children. Our thing is to work within their context, their environment, their culture, to make sure that they can develop a habit of reading. Yes?
Building on that point, I would just like to affirm the fact that you are giving students books in which they're reflected in, not only does it help in the learning process, but it helps a lot in their identity development.
Absolutely. And
even in recognition that help doesn't necessarily need to come from an outside perspective,
yes,
but that they can find it within themselves. So I think that it's especially noteworthy that you all are being culturally sensitive, especially within a literary conversation.
It's an excellent comment, and it's part of our business strategy. We very much value local context. All of our countries, every employee in all of our countries are local staff. They're nationals. Most nonprofits, I won't name names, but most nonprofits, their country managers, their chief financial officers, their executive staff, we'll call that. They're expats. They're from America or Britain or Australia or New Zealand or somewhere else. All of our employees in the country are natives of that country. And we think there's a huge, huge upside to that. There's a downside as well. As chief talent officer, we've got to find the talent in those countries to deliver on what we've committed to. And in some of those countries, it's very tough to find a country director. When you're competing with for-profit companies, huge multinational nonprofits that are $600, $700 million organizations. But we've been very successful in doing that so far. Yes?
I know you were mentioning how you kind of work with government in terms of hiring librarians. So on a larger scale, how is Fundraising kind of working with the government to kind of implement this universal education as opposed to just building libraries?
Yeah. All the work we do is through the government. We partner with the government. We only work in government schools. And so we work with the ministries of education. We work with whatever government entities there are in those countries that are responsible for educating children in those countries. And the great thing about that is when they see the success, when they see the difference that our programs create in those schools, they start adopting those programs in other schools. First of all, they encourage us to go to other schools, which is fine and great as long as we can get the funding to do it. But we've now seen, like in Zambia, they're interested in actually, we're sort of designing their education system as it relates to literacy. So it's a great opportunity. One more question and we'll have to go on. Yes?
So how do you ensure that the government is not corrupting? So how do you ensure that you have enough transparency to see how money invested is invested to the program?
Well, because we actually deliver those services. We deliver the services either through our own staff in country or through, we have 100 employees, for example, 100 staff in India. And so we deliver it through our staff, or we deliver it through partner NGOs that we partner with in these countries, or we work, as I said, directly with the government. But we have a monitoring, research, and evaluation, extensive monitoring, research, and evaluation program that evaluates the effectiveness of our programs, evaluates the implementation of our programs, that makes sure not only that it's being implemented, that money is being spent where it should be spent, but also that we're getting the outcomes that we hope for. And we feed that information back to our donors. It's a huge, huge asset in getting additional funding. So that's we can't ensure the government's not corrupt. But we can ensure that our programs are running the way we've designed. Now it is a challenge as we continue to think about scaling and we continue to think about growing. How do you continue to have that amount of control over your programs? And it's something that we're thinking about now in our long-range strategic plan. Good question. Girls' Education Program. This is the second pillar of our program design. And as I said earlier, Girls' Education Program focuses not on primary school. Literacy and instruction really focuses on first grade, second grade. And we're starting to explore a little bit third grade. Girls' Education Program focuses on secondary school. It starts in primary school. And the idea is to keep those girls in school so that they can get into secondary school and graduate. We have been working with girls' education programs for over 12 years, and we have girls now that are in college that never even expected to finish primary school. In the countries that we work in, the tragic thing is that in part of their culture, in many of the countries we work in, girls are undervalued. They're not encouraged to be educated. They're often asked to go to work as soon as they're able to go to work to help contribute to supporting the family. And it's very, very difficult to keep them in schools. And so our Girls' Education Program is designed to work against that pretty awesome trend. And we're having a great deal of success. Educating girl leads to prosperity. This is about business and how it affects not just literacy, but development world, how it affects not just literacy, but also prosperity. And you can see from this prosperity index, when you look at the number of girls per 100 boys in classrooms, you can see in different parts of the world how those societies tend to prosper. So we know through UN studies, through a number of different studies, the benefit of educating girls. Women do 67% of the world's work. 67% of the world's work. It's not uncommon for me to travel, and even when I was with ARCO, I was in the middle of the desert. We were shooting seismic in the middle of the desert near the Syrian border. And every few kilometers there's a village. And we'd roll into the village, and the men in the village would come out to our Jeep and invite us into the tea house to have tea with them. And the women are out in the fields working. So 67% of the women do the world's work. Women earn 10% of the world's income. They're doing most of the work. They only earn 10% of the world's income. And they only own 1% of the world's property. Education is transformation. And through programs like Room to Read, we're able to see that realized. Every extra year of secondary education for girls can increase future wages by 10 to 20%. Every extra year of secondary education. So if we can keep them in school through our GEP program, even if they choose not to go to college after graduating, they're going to be much, much better contributors in terms of supporting their families. They're going to be much smarter about how they handle their personal health and their life planning. They're going to be much smarter in terms of when they choose to raise children, raising children that are literate. All of those advantages will occur. It breaks my heart to see so many young people here in the U.S. have so many more opportunities to have a great education, and they don't take advantage of it. These students, that's all they want to do, and we try and help them do that. So our girls' education program really has sort of a four-pronged approach. We work, of course, with the girl. We work with them in terms of activities, to expose them to new things, to broaden their horizons, to help them understand that there's life beyond the farm or the rural community in which they live. We also help them with materials. We buy them bicycles, because many of them, they may be 2, 3, 4 kilometers from school. And so bike is very helpful to help them get to school. We pay for tuition, we pay for uniforms, we pay for fees. We do everything we can financially to encourage that girl and encourage their family to allow that girl to stay in school. In addition to that, we work with the family. We conduct parent workshops. We understand the culture in these countries. And so we try and help those families understand that, yeah, if you send your 8, 9, 10-year-old off to work, yes, they can make a little money for the family. But if you allow them to stay in school, and if you allow them to finish secondary school, and maybe even go to college, they're going to be able to help that family in so much greater ways. And those girls are going to be so much better off. So we try and get that message across, and we're very successful in doing that. Mothers are easy sales. This is what they would have liked for themselves when they were growing up as girls in their countries. It's the dads that can be a little tougher. But we also work with the tribal leaders. Many of these countries are tribal cultures, and we work with the tribal leaders to help them understand and help them influence their community. We work with the teachers, as we said, in the school, and training teachers to understand how to teach schools, how to teach girls, how to encourage girls to stay in school, how to understand the problems that girls face when they're in school, and often minorities in those schools. And we also contribute to school infrastructure, as we've already talked about, and we certainly work with the communities, with community leaders, they have like parent-teachers associations there. We work with those parents in the community that are involved in the schools. We contribute, as we said, to all facets of that girl's life as it relates to her education. And it's been a very, very successful program. Some of the things that we do in terms of girls' education outside of the classroom, we do life skills training. So we work in a very purposeful and intentional way to help them develop the skills to navigate life's challenges, to make decisions for themselves, to be more self-confident, to be able to express themselves, to say no, to offer an option when they're being asked to go to work. We teach these workshops to help them do that. We provide, as I said, financial support, engagement with the families, as we said, mentors to the communities. These are life skills class. This is a little life skills class. Young lady giving a presentation. Mentor. This is one of our social mobilizers. Social mobilizers work mostly with the communities and with the girls. The communities being the parents or the tribal leaders or the PTA association. But they're this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where the direct implementation occurs. And most of these social mobilizers in our countries are room-to-read staff. But in some countries, they work for our NGO partners, our non-governmental agency partners, and in some cases, they might work for the government education ministry. But they're trained by us. The financial support we talked about, buying bicycles, paying fees, and so forth. Academic support, of course, tutorial, making sure that these girls are able to pass their level exams as they continue to progress in school, and working with the families, as we said. And then advocacy with the governments, making sure that the governments have visibility to our programs, have visibility to the outcomes of our programs, and really understand the difference our programs make. So, I'm going to talk a bit about our business model, but before I do that, I just want to ask quickly if there are any questions about our programs. Yes?
Yeah, I have two quick questions. One is, does Riverside have any control over the curriculum and quality of education that's being provided? And then also, how do you select people that you're going to help? Because I'm sure that must be a difficult decision for you to
Yeah.
resources.
Yeah, we do have we have the amount of control that we're able to advocate for with the governments and demonstrate, you know, the outcomes. And so in countries that we've been in for a while, where we have a track record, we have much more control. We design part of the curriculum. We train the teachers. We provide the materials. We publish workbooks and things that students use in class to help them learn. In other countries, you know, we're not quite there yet. Vietnam's a little tougher, you know, because it's communist. Laos a little tougher because it's communist. But we're making, even there, we're making great strides. And in terms of how do we select them, it depends on the service that we're providing. For schools, we actually require challenge grants, and I'll talk a bit about this in our business model. So the community has to put some skin in the game in order for us to build a school in that community. We'll talk more about that. We also, you know, work in areas that we look for economies of scale. Our headquarters are often always in the capital, but the work that we do is often 100, 200 kilometers outside of the capital or more. And so we look for economies of scale. How can we sort of create districts and have a district office and then splinter out from there to the various schools that can be supported by that office. So there are different things that we consider. Our business model, there are a few things that I want to talk about. These aren't all the things, but a few things I want to cover. Define success and stick to the plan. Know your core funding support. Research, monitoring, and evaluation, which allows us to provide an ROI, which is critically important for our fundraising efforts and for the effectiveness of our programs. Efficient and effective processes and systems. Invest locally, keep innovation alive, stay globally connected, partnerships, compete for talent and reputation. I'm going to have to go through these pretty quickly, but depth and breadth of success. We give a lot of thought to, first of all, what countries we're going to work in. We don't work in conflict area countries. We don't work in countries where governments are not supportive of what we're trying to do because we only work through the government. We don't work in countries that maybe, you know, are interested in doing this but don't have the infrastructure to make it happen in terms of their education ministry or what have you. But you can see here, these are the 10 countries we're currently in. Bangladesh, Cambodia, India, Laos, Nepal, South Africa. I think you can read those from the back. These are our various programs, and you can see which programs we have in which countries. So once we get into a country, we increase penetration in terms of the kinds of programs that we offer. And as you can see, there are only a few countries where we're not fully servicing that population with all of our programs. In terms of fundraising, we have a very, very different fundraising model from most nonprofits working internationally. We have and take very little government funding. Most of our funding comes from individuals and family foundations. In fact, 67% comes from individuals and family foundations. More than half of our funding comes from outside of the United States. We also get a significant amount of funding from corporations and foundations, and we also get funding from, as we said, from the government. But right now, this year, about $100,000. We kind of want to stay away from the government because it gets political. It's a valve that can be turned on and off at a whim, and we want to have sustainable programs that we control and that we work in those areas where we feel we're most needed, not where the government thinks is politically helpful. Some of our top corporate funders and our global approach to fundraising. I said that more than half of our funding comes from international locations. We have over 50 volunteer chapters around the world. And these are where those chapters are located in the U.S. and then also internationally. Those volunteer chapters, believe it or not, raised almost $13 million for us last year. These are volunteers. There's no paid staff. But these people are really committed to what we're doing, and they do a fantastic job supporting Room to Read. In addition to that, we have an extensive research, monitoring, and evaluation process. It's part of our business plan. There are a number of huge multinationals, $500, $600, $700 million organizations that do very little in the way of research monitoring and evaluation. They implement programs. It's on a project-by-project basis, usually a 2 or 3 year project, and they move on. Just an example of our program, 517 libraries were evaluated this year, 208 in Cambodia, 279 in Nepal, and 30 in South Africa. And what we found is that 90% of these libraries were still functioning after our program left. Once we build a library, we're committed to that school for 3 years. And at the end of the 3 years, we move on to a new school. And it's up to the community to keep that library going, to sustain it. It's up to the schools to continue to train the librarians, and to continue to operate. But we go back to those schools to determine whether that model is working. And we're finding that it is. We're also data-driven as it relates to the quality of these libraries. And you can see over the years the quality has increased substantially after a 3-year commitment to that school. And it's been sustained year over year. Efficiency and effectiveness is one of our business models. I'm very, very proud to say that we're one of only 3% of the nonprofits that receive a 4-star rating from Charity Navigator. Charity Navigator is the leading evaluator of nonprofits. And we've received a 4-star rating 6 years in a row, which only 3% of the foundations, organizations have received. And one of the reasons for that is that we really think about costs, and we really keep our overhead down. More than 80% of our donations go to our programs. And one of the ways that we do that is we think of innovative ways to get things done. In this case, Bam Beef is a beef hauler in Zambia, and they were hauling beef to some of our rural areas and deadheading back with empty trucks. And we worked out a deal so that we could get furniture and other things shipped in those trucks that we use in our libraries and in our schools. So at no cost to us. I said we invest locally. This is some of our leadership in a few different countries. Well, mostly Zambia. Sam here is the country manager for Zambia, country director. Weissman is the regional director for Africa. And most of the other folks here are on Sam's staff. Chris is the country director for South Africa. So as I said, we hire local staff. We build local capacity. As I said, we train illustrators, we train writers, and we get them started in children's book publishing. And we also keep innovation alive by continuing to do things like using Zambeef to move our furniture. One of our key strategies is to stay globally connected. We are a global organization that has core values that cannot be compromised, even when we're working in countries that may have a different culture and a different way of doing business. And so those core values are, in fact, closely held in our organization and reinforced around the world. But we also respect the local context. And we do, in every case that we can, we do adapt our policies and our procedures and our approaches to work in those local countries. So it's a fine balance between making sure that we don't lose who we are as an organization in terms of our culture, and at the same time making sure that we honor and respect the cultures in our local countries. Community engagement partnerships, I mentioned before, you want a school, you've got to get some skin in the game. You've got to either help us build it, you've got to provide materials that will help us build it, or in some other way, help support, in a material way, help support the construction of those schools. And this is a community here in, looks like Bangladesh, that's doing just that. Some of our global partnerships, Half the Sky, the International Cricket World Cup, the Global Clinton Initiative, Aga Khan University in Zambia. Half the Sky, I will mention a commercial right quick. October 1st and 2nd, Half the Sky is doing a series on PBS that will feature, I think, 10 different nonprofits. Room to Read is one of those. And a very, very interesting program if it's something topic that you're interested in. Competing for talent. This is part of the thing that I focus a lot on. We have, as I said, benefited over 6.6 million children, and our goal is to benefit more than 10 million by 2015. But we are a labor-intensive business. The oil industry was a capital-intensive business that I was in, but we're a labor-intensive business. Everything that we do through people. And so it's very, very important to us to make sure that we can get the right people, talented people that can help meet the needs of the organization. In terms of media recognition, these are some of the media partners. Financial Times, the CEO of Financial Times is actually on our board. Former CEO of Yahoo is on our board. We're fortunate to have a number of very, very high-profile board members that help us tremendously in terms of the strategies for our organization and our fundraising. And Room to Read in general operates like a for-profit company. Most of our executives are from the for-profit world. And so when we're recruiting, one of the points that we have to get across is that we really do focus on sort of for-profit values and cultures culture in terms of working at a fast pace, in terms of being innovative, in terms of actually having and measuring outcomes and holding people accountable for those outcomes. I mentioned Charity Navigator. And these are just what we've accomplished to date. Over 13,000 libraries have been either remodeled or built. Over 15,000 girls are in our program or have benefited from our program. Over 1,600 schools, over 700 books have been published in local languages. And as I said before, over 6.6 million. Lessons learned. These are some of the things that, the challenges that we face and lessons we've learned along the way. Define what success looks like and stick to our knitting. I mean, we have had lots of opportunities. People approach us all the time about getting involved in water or getting involved in health or getting involved in other areas. And all of these things are important and are needed. But we decided that we're not only going to focus on education, but we're going to focus on education at the primary level for literacy instruction, and we're going to focus on education in terms of our girls' education program at the secondary level. And that's it. Right now our board is saying, why don't we take these girls on into college? Why don't we have a program for them there? So we're talking about it, but we're very, very much focused on it. It's all about people. We understand that. And we maintain this global network that I talked about. Partnering is very critical to us, not just with our donors, but also with in terms of implementing our programs and being able to keep our costs low. Investing in capacity, local capacity, so that we're able to get books in local languages in a local context at reasonable cost. Data-driven organization, making sure we measure, making sure we evaluate what we're doing and we get a return on our investment. Being opportunistic and telling our story. Putting fund into fundraising. We do that all the time. We bring all of our chapter leaders in once a year for a huge party. And they pay for it, by the way. They pay their own travel expenses. But we have a great time, and it keeps them motivated, fired up. It's kind of like the conventions, political conventions. We continually evolve, valuing our strategic plan. And we do run a 3-year strategic plan. I have in my department an HR long-range plan. That's a 3-year plan. And being true to our core values, making sure that no matter what we do and no matter where we work, we don't lose who we are, and that we continue to support the programs in the way that we think are going to be most helpful. So that's all I had to say on this subject here. Thank you very much, and are there other questions?
Hi, when you were talking about the countries that you worked in, you mentioned that you don't work in countries that are like conflict areas or countries where the government doesn't support what you're doing. So how do you think education should be approached? Because these children simply refuse. So how do you?
Well, right now there are plenty of countries that aren't in conflict where we can work, and so we can reach. Right now, we're reaching as many children as we can afford to reach. If we get to a point where we've reached all of those children, and the only children left are children living in conflict areas, we'll probably change our approach. But right now, we're very concerned, of course, about the safety of our staff, and very concerned about working with governments that are going to allow us to really affect their education system in their countries. And that's important. Yes.
You mentioned how in one of the countries, the country government is actually talking to you about designing a literacy program. And I was wondering if there's any concern for becoming too big and your own entity separate from the government, because in the long term it seems like education might be something that you want funded through the government and controlled by the government. Is there any effort to, like, with such little government funding, transition towards a government playing a bigger role in education, or is that something you try to keep separate?
No, maybe I misrepresented. Government plays a huge role. When I talk about designing programs, working in partnership with government to design programs, what I'm saying is that we'll design a literacy instruction program that the governments will then adopt and implement throughout their school systems. We're not implementing those programs per se. So we work with the government in partnership with the government. We don't have a desire to be a separate entity in those countries.
Just to follow up on that, just really quick, for the curriculum that's developed, is it developed by local talent? Like the literacy, is it developed by
Yes. Well, generally. We have, our thought leaders are in San Francisco. We have PhDs in education, and they're in San Francisco. So they develop initial design. In our regional offices, we have a regional office in South Africa, we have a regional office in New Delhi, and in India. And in our regional offices, we have a hybrid of sort of design, technical experts, and implementers, people that can actually implement those programs. And then in our country offices, we principally employ people that can implement those programs on the ground, that are local staff. So that's the way the model works. I saw a hand over here? Yes.
Okay, you don't have to go into too much detail, but what kind of approaches did your volunteer centers take in soliciting people's funding? It seemed like your campaign was very successful.
It's amazing. I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
Wine galas. We have a Students Helping Students program where students work in a high school and get high school students do car washes and collecting pennies and things like that. I mean, these volunteers really have no guidance from us in terms of how they raise funds. They're extremely creative, they're extremely enthusiastic, and they just get out there and make it happen. In some cases, they help with our corporations and foundations. They arrange meetings with people they know, friends of theirs that are CEOs or head of social responsibility departments in large corporations. But it's whatever method they choose. Another hand? Yes.
Yes, I wonder if you are, the whole program is really rely on the fundraising side and how about sustainability. And I wonder if instead of sustainability will translate into a social enterprise. And how about your investment in public learning and also the investment in local areas? Are they really are something that will help you turn your direction into a social enterprise?
Okay, I think I heard all of that. The first part of that, sustainability is very important to us, and that's why we go back and actually measure whether our programs after we leave are still operating. And by involving the communities and involving the school systems, we ensure sustainability. Because if we just went in and built the school and walked away, that community has no investment in that school, except their children may attend it. But they don't have any skin in the game. They didn't help to pay for it. They didn't help to build it. So by working with the community, we actually create and increase sustainability. Is that part of your question? And then the other part of that, in terms of social responsibility, we work with, as I said, local authors. We work with local illustrators. We help build small businesses in these various communities to provide the services that we need to deliver the services to the students in those countries. So that's something. Printers, usually we print in the country, but in some countries printing costs are extremely high, and we make printing more cost-effective manner. Yes?
To follow up after her question, after room to read ends her 3 years out of school, like where would the school secure additional funding to continue?
Well, this is kind of an interesting thing because we're always sort of, anytime you come into a government and say we're here to help and we got money, they sort of turn off the spigot and we turn on the spigot. You have to balance that. Often these governments will have money, but that money's not being used in the best way. The teachers aren't trained. They're being paid a salary, but they're not trained, so they're not effective. Once we're there, we train teachers. They learn to become more effective, and once we leave, their same salary is being paid, but they're more effective at what they're doing. So often the money isn't so much the issue. It's more the training, it's more the methodology that we use, it's more the materials that we develop, and those materials we want to make available to everyone. We're talking now about maybe putting all of our books in an e-format and just sending them out and letting anyone print them who wants to print them. We're worried about quality control, and so we're trying to figure out how do we continue to manage the quality of the text once it's printed. But we're happy to just give our books away, because our thing is we want people to have more access. We want more children to read. And we know in some of these countries they're not able to do that because they don't have books. Yes?
So for the Education Girls program, have you thought about using the idea of crowdfunding to support individual girls?
What type of funding?
Crowdfunding, where the audience is much broader range, to support individual girls instead of supporting the whole education program. I mean, when you put up a profile, I think the video of Sophie is very touching. We thought about putting these videos of individual profiles in one if we had.
We do. They're on our websites. You can access the videos. We have blogs. We have a number of different things on our website to get the message out. We don't encourage individuals. Gabrielle Union was in Vietnam visiting our project for 10 by 10, the actress, and she decided that she was so touched by a girl she met with our girls' education program, she decided she wanted to sponsor that girl. That's something that we don't encourage, but because we'd rather that funding come through eventually. Right. So instead, give us the money and let us sponsor the girl. Because, well, first of all, in terms of motives, in terms of, you don't always know why people are doing what they're doing, right? But the other thing is we need to be able, if you start sponsoring, have individual donors sponsoring girls, it's very problematic in terms of our fundraising. It creates a number of restricted fund dollars that can't be used anywhere else in the organization. It becomes problematic. So we try and manage that.
Thank you so much. Your organization is so innovative and forward-thinking. Your commitment to nimbleness and respecting the experiences of people on the ground. So I was surprised when I saw the renovated classroom reproduced a kind of educational structure that is an artifact, I think, from 100 years back, where the teacher's in the front of the classroom, the kids are sitting in rows, and the power structure is distributed in that way. So I wonder if you're thinking about, in your teacher training, encouraging teachers to think a little bit about a more participatory sort of educational model.
That's the only model we teach. That picture happened to have the teacher at the top of the classroom at that time, but the only model we teach is engagement. To have teachers actually mingling with the students, having desks that we can move out of the way and everyone gets on the floor and sorts things out. As I said, we publish these giant workbooks, and we call them big books. Some of them this big that teachers can use to interact with students. So that's exactly the old model is the model that they in fact use. Teacher stands at the front and lectures, right? Yeah. And that's what we're trying to get away from. Yes.
Okay. So, but I want to give Gabrielle